have started with successive governments. The current government has amended the development plan that was commenced some years back. So yes, of course, Mr. Chairman, currently we have a railway development master plan.
Chairman, in the nominees briefing, as sector minister designate, what has been brought to your attention in terms of railway development in the country? What should Ghanaians expect? What is going on from Tema, Akusumbo, Takwa?
Mr. Chairman, the existing railway network in the country is made up of 3 major lines, the Western, Eastern, and then the Central line. Cumulatively, these add up to 947 kilometers. Mr. Chairman, the existing network is largely confined to the southern parts of the country, with the city of Kumasi being its northernmost parts of the lines that have been built. Mr. Chairman, these lines were built during the British colonial period, and they are all narrow gauge with single tracks with a maximum axle load of about just 16 tons. Largely not operational except for freight currently that we see along some of the lines. The current passenger lines that we have run from Accra to Kumasi, which was operational sometime, but had to be put to a halt as a result of the COVID. The state of the current infrastructure, Mr. Chairman, it's the development of the western line from Takoradi to Kumasi, which is 340 kilometers, the redevelopment of the eastern line from Tema through Accra to Kumasi, which is also 330 kilometers, the construction of the central spine from Kumasi through Paga, 595 kilometers on the Burkina Faso border, and also the Ghana-Burkina Faso Railway Connectivity Project. Development of Metro Line Rail, also both in Accra and Kumasi, are also high in the agenda. So, Mr. Chairman, briefly, that's some of the important points within the current Railway Development Master Plan that we have.
Okay, Chairman, Mr. Nominee, you are a Minister for Energy. We'll come to your performance at that level. But Chairman, on the 7th of January, when the Speaker was to be elected with Parliament being sworn in some of the videos that we have watched and in some of the commentaries that we have heard, regrettable incident, which is a negative on our parliamentary democracy. You were heard, kindly put your mic off, Chairman. You were heard in some nice Muslim bubu dress. I'll kill. Did you mean that? I'll kill you all. And I'm told that your words was used as justification by those who ought not to be on the floor of Parliament, like the security invasion. So you were heard, I'll kill you. Did you mean that? And what did you mean by I'll kill you? And who were you targeting to kill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the night of 7th January actually was a black day in Ghana's democracy. Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman, I used that word. I regretted it. As I stood before this platform, I want to withdraw that word unconditionally. My constituents, of course, are watching me. Mr. Chairman, I'm a peaceful man. Of course, the use of the word came out of overreaction, which is, of course, one of my negative aspects, overreaction. Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to work on that, and I unconditionally
overreaction, were you saying in a fit of anger?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in an anger mood, I use that word.
Who angered you? I was asking who angered you? Who angered you? Follow up the chairman.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I wish my entry to the hall should have been played back. As a first-timer entry into this hall, my good friends, colleagues from the part of region that I came from together with other members, welcoming in quite a bit hostile way. I thought, as a new member, having won a very difficult seat, as we chair up, only to be hooted at Juloe, Fiapito, and all those words. That actually was a trigger, but jokingly, they were of course joking. That was also a trigger of my anger by using that word. Mr. Chairman, I reiterated to say that I unconditionally withdraw the word.
So, Chair, just for clarification, because you see, I was here myself, that when the Volta caucus mainly received you in that joking language, and you say that you jokingly said, I'll kill you, I'll kill you.
Remember, he has said a fit of anger. I will give you another temptation.
Let's go. So, I tell the camera.
Honorable Agaga.
Thank you.
So you were joking?
Joking.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, I'm sure you have been briefed by the Ministry for Railway Development. And in those briefings, you must have been told that one major challenge that confronts the Ministry for Railways Development is the unavailability of land and challenges associated with land acquisition for the right of way. Now, if you're giving the nod, how do you intend to navigate around this very difficult issue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's a fact that right of way is gradually graduating to a very serious problem within the railway ministry in terms of acquisition of land for the tracks. If this honourable House grants me the nod going forward, we would have to include the cost of acquisition of land in the project cost. The problem in the past was as a result of separating land acquisition from the construction. Because most of this funding are global funds that are sourced specifically for the project, my understanding and my thinking, if given the nod, is that if we build it in as a component of the project construction cost, then payment of acquisition becomes easier and right of way will quickly be acquired for construction and completion of the railway line projects. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, Honorable Amewu, globally, funds for capital-intensive projects are currently very limited due to the COVID pandemic. And yet, we know that railway development requires huge investment with good returns on the investments. But in the face of the COVID pandemic, how do you intend to attract investment for the development of the railway sector?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the railway sector generally should be looked as a social project. I deviate slightly from the school of thought that believe that the railway should be an investment project. If the railway sector is taken as a social project for which government funding of the project will reflect on the balance sheet of the government, then the after effect of the railway, which will drive the growth of the GDP, will be worth paying for the cost of construction. Mr. Chairman, it is very difficult for a global fund these days, say $2.4 billion, to be run on a railway track of about 2,000 kilometers and expect a payback period between 30 and 50 years. I don't see any investor doing that. No prudent investment analysis will trigger such decision to commit such a fund. But if rather government puts that on its balance sheet as a debt, and the impact of the construction generates economic growth in terms of GDP growth, then that will be worth paying. So I'll be considering the railway project as a social investment project, rather as a social project, rather than an investment project or product. But notwithstanding that, Mr. Chairman, some of the routes are still profitable. And so if it is analyzed and determined that investment decision will be taken based on profitability index, and the investors are convinced beyond all reasonable doubt, of course, we will identify those routes based on their analysis and give it out to them as an investment product. For instance, there is a school of thought that the continuation of the railway line from Tema, through Akosombo to Mpakadam, that particular line, which will end up in Burkina Faso as a continental development project. That line, for instance, has been classified by most analysts as a profitable venture. Those one can go into investment product where we can package it, maybe on build, operate, and transfer for a larger period or as a concession for the investors.
Mr. Honorable Amewu, some transport analysts have argued that in our country, Ghana, which has a huge infrastructure deficit with respect to our road network, which is estimated to be in the tune of $5 billion US, that it is not even necessary to have a ministry, such as the Ministry for Railway Development, and seek to invest in that sector, but rather that we should concentrate on bridging the gaps or the deficit with respect to the road sector. With those views, do you think the ministry that would superintend over if given the nod is relevant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would beg to differ from the school of thought about the deficit. Yes, of course, the deficit exists in the range of about 5 billion, as you rightly put it. And the attention, therefore, for any emerging country might be, let's not concentrate on other sectors, but let's put attention on the roads and begin to fix our roads. Mr. Chairman, the railway sector has its own advantage. The lifespan of most of our roads that we witness in the country, maximum it's 11 years. A railway sector that is well constructed can take up to a minimum of about 50 years. The advantage is that when you put your railway lines in order, then you are going to migrate traffic from the current existing dense traffic on our roads to the railway. Already, most of our tracks, that lies on the roads are above the axle load, but because they don't have any alternative routes to use, they were forced to go on those routes. And that is why we have most of our roads within a few, years currently are in a very deplorable state. With the construction of the railway sector, you are going to migrate those traffic onto the rail line. One great advantage that the railway line also does is that a number of passengers and goods can be moved within the shortest possible time. For instance, the standard gauge that the country is trying to introduce now is going to run at a speed of almost about 160 kilometers per hour. What that does is that people will get to their destination on time. Productivity will increase, because if you quite recollect, you sit in a railway, you can confidently conduct your business in a railway. So people who will be in a railway can equally be working in the railway line because of the stability and the level of angles at which it travels at. So with the introduction of railway, we expect growth in GDP of this country, and that is why I think that we need to combine both the railway and then the road. His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, in his inaugural address, stated categorically about his intention, to make sure that the railway industry becomes a very viable sector in this country. And I think that we have to work in accordance with that direction.
You are done, right? No, I'm not allowing that. Yes, Honorable. Sorry, I'm looking for some document to assist us. No. I'm grateful, Honorable Chair. Congratulations, Honorable John Peter Amewu, on your nomination. Let me take you back to your previous portfolio at the Energy Ministry. On 24th May 2019, in your press briefing, you indicated, among other things, that the energy sector arrears as of January 2019 stood at $2.748 million. You went further to forecast that An additional 1.268 million will be added to the debt within the same year. In your conclusion, you intimated that the debt will grow to more than $12.564 million by end of 2023. What, in your view, contributed to this compounding debt, and what interventions did you undertake to minimize this increase in debt during your tenure?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, it's true. I raised those points whilst at the sector. There were various factors that contributed to the debt we have within the energy sector. Key among them has to do with the consumptions of energy by the various metropolitan ministries, departments, and agencies. Mr. Chairman, another point has to do with the losses. The losses are both what we witness at the distribution end and also at the supply end, where we have a lot of power theft and collections that have not been keyed in properly. We have managerial problems also within the sector. Mr. Chairman, among them also is the obsolete equipment that we have currently within the electricity sector. Most of the equipment that we have are some that are lasting quite close to about 40, 50 years and have not been replaced. When you have this sort of obsolete equipment, transmission of electricity through them is at risk because you lose most of the, the current before they get to the burner tip where the consumer is waiting to get it. So these couples of factors, are very key in raising the debt we have in the system. One of the key factors has to do with the feed. By the feed, I'm talking about the fuel or the gas. The gas supply is also a component of the electricity. Don't forget, the electricity is just a derived demand. So at that end, other factors that go in to drive the generations are also key components. And so if you add all these components together, our estimation was rightly what we said. But, Mr. Chairman, that assertion was based on the fact that if nothing is done, we go with the debt profile as I've stated. Fortunately, before I left the ministry, we put in a lot of measures with the assistance of Cabinet. We came out with the Energy Recovery Program. We have done the master gas house clearing processes. We have tried to migrate some of the power plants that were previously feeding on hard fuel, heavy fuel. Of course, Mr. Chairman, gas is cheaper. So where you have a stranded gas that has not been put into good use, and you are using a heavy fuel, you expect the penalty price that the consumer pays to be higher. Currently, most of our generations, more than 60 to 65%, are running on gas together with the Akosombo. So these measures that we put in, gradually it's addressing the energy debt problem that we have. Mr. Chairman, I also use this opportunity to announce to Ghanaians that as today, Ghana government has fully paid its debt that it owes ECG. All the debts that Ghana government owes, including the debts from the municipal, metropolitan, district administration, have been fully paid by the Ministry of Finance. And I think that is a very good thing that the government has done. And ECG currently is even owing Ghana government an amount of about 400 million Ghana cedis, which is yet to be reconciled. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very well, Honorable Minister. Now on railway development. Finding eminent expression the railway master plan, which I suppose you obtained briefing on, are two major developments, the central line and the central spine. If you have obtained briefing on these developments, can you advise the committee on the status of each of these developments, considering that central line specifically passes through major towns in Asin South constituency, Asin Adiemra, and even Asin Central, Asin Dompim, and Asin Fosu, and assurance that you would give, when given the nod, that you would develop this line with alacrity to the benefit of the people of Asin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, of course, the central line, the central spine, just as the western lines are very key, railway tracks within the master plan. Currently, work is progressing on the western line. A lot of feasibility studies have been done on the central spine, and other work have also been done on the eastern line. So I'm giving the House this assurance that if the House gives me the nod, I will move everything possible to make sure that this line is completed. The advantage of this line is the fact that it goes to some of our mineral deposit areas. Currently, for instance, most of our bauxite and manganese that have been transported have been done through the normal transportation system using road. And that is putting a lot of traffic on our roads, and our roads are not lasting as we expect. It is expectation that if these lines are completed, and the fact that they will be going through some of these mineral deposit areas, haulage will of course becomes very easy for the mine owners. And it will also reduce cost of transportation, which will therefore add value to government share in some of these mining communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Zuela.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Honorable Nominee. My first question has to do with the One District, One Factory project in the first term of the MPP government. You will agree with me that it was one of your flagship programs. And I think some factories were constructed across the country. But we've also received reports about some of them not being connected to electricity, and the failure of the Energy Ministry then to facilitate the connection of these factories to electricity. What would you say were the reasons why these factories couldn't be connected, and at the time that you were Sector Minister for Energy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's a fact that the One District, One Factory is one of the key government policies that translates to its project. At the time I was the Sector Minister, we had a number of requests for the project. I can tell you on record that we have done more than 60% of those requests that have come to us. We've made sure that we send electricity to those areas. Of course, a number of them we've not been able to complete because some were requesting for transformers of different capacity. At that point in time, Mr. Chairman, we do not have some of those transformers in stock. But the materials that were available under our disposal, then with the collaboration of the Electricity Company of Ghana, we've been able to extend electricity to some of those areas. But yes, of course, it's on record that we've not been able to do all the 100%. My understanding is that because this is quite key to us, the incoming minister, as I've briefed him already, is going to take it up and make sure those areas that have not been connected, he will do to make sure that completion of those areas are also done within the shortest possible time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. My next question is on gas. Ghana is known to have excess supply of gas. And your ministry, whilst you were at Energy, you supervised the construction of an LNG reception and gasification facility, which commits Ghana to extra gas that we do not need. In the event that this contract is terminated at any time, would you agree with me that it will be tantamount to causing financial loss to the state?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I supervised the construction of an import terminal of an LNG whilst I was the Sector Minister. Currently, as we speak as of today, the demand-supply balances of our gas projected into future gives us an indication that there may be some deficit going into the future. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, the major reasons why that project is coming on is not coming on as an element to balance demand and supply, but it's coming in as a security of supply issue. The energy sector is quite a very dicey sector. You would have witnessed the difficulty we have with our gas coming from Nigeria when the pipeline got broken. So to keep our lights on, it is proper that we put in measures to have a security of supply. And so that project, it's generally described as a security of supply measure to address the gas in the future. By 2027, the energy demand balances of gas clearly tells us that we may have some deficit from 2027, which is about 5 years from now to go. So it is also built in anticipations of the demand that may arise in future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, there's a follow-up, if you don't mind, with your leave. Honorable Nominee, my colleague was asking you about a matter related to termination of contract and its possible judgment debt effect. Have you had the cost to terminate any contract upon assumption of office, the Ministry of Energy, either you or your predecessor?
With regard to this specific project, there had not been any discussions to terminate the project, not at all. That discussions have not come up, Mr. Chairman. And we do not intend to terminate that project, Mr. Chairman.
Have you terminated any other contract?
Mr. Chairman, there is another LNG project called Wagel, which was supposed to be sited in Takoradi. Yes, Mr. Chairman, that project was terminated. It was not terminated by the ministry, it was terminated at convenience by the supplier. So yes, of course, Wagel terminated that contract on its own.
Is it the one that has resulted in 134 million judgment debt? If not, apprise us with that one.
Yeah, it's the one that resulted into about 50 million judgment debt. There were two contracts that were terminated. One was the power project, which is the GPGC, and then the other is the LNG project. The LNG resulted in a judgment debt of about $50 million US.
Yes, you can have your laugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up to the second question. Mr. Nominee, please, considering the effect of the surplus gas on Ghana, what plans would you say you left behind to address that serious problem?
The issue of the surplus gas, which was becoming more of a problem in terms of the debt that the energy sector has been addressed through a number of ways. The first was to institute what we call the natural gas clearinghouse methodology. Mr. Chairman, we have gas coming from 3 different sources in Ghana. We have, just excuse me to say, the OCTP, which we call the ENI gas. We have gas coming from Nigeria, which we call the pipeline gas. And then we also have the gas coming from the TEN and Jubilee, which is the associated gas. Mr. Chairman, those gases, for instance, the Jubilee and TEN gases were priced at 1.2 and 1.75 per MMBTU. Gas coming from Nigeria is priced at a different price, if I quite remember, about $7.9 per MMBTU. And then our own domestic gas also priced at a different level. So there was a complete confusion in the sector as to how these gases, though commingled together, but spent by various power users, will be paid for. So what we have done is to come out with an average system to price all those gases. So currently, all the gases have been commingled, and they've been priced at a price of 6.08 MMBTU, unit. What that does is that anybody that is, of course, consuming gas above, the average price, of course, would have to pay for by those who are consuming gas below the average price. So, for instance, if you are taking more of the Jubilee gas, which you are expected to pay about 1.27, but because of the commingled price, you will now be paying an extra more than the 2.77. You are expected to refund that balance to another sector, say VRA. So the gas clearinghouse system is now putting in measures to make sure that we are about to address these imbalances in the payment of the gas system. This is one of the major things that we have left behind to address some of the wastage in the gas system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Brent.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Mr. Nominee, I've heard you give answers on contract termination. I think about 2 questions in that direction. But I want to be very specific on this one. The International Court of Arbitration has awarded a cost of $134 million and an interest of $30 million against the government of Ghana over a cancellation of the emergency power agreement with GCGP Limited. 1, were you the minister responsible at the time of the termination? And if so, what led to the termination, and what is all this termination and judgment debt about? If you can be very specific to the committee and to Ghanaians to understand what has happened.
The government of Ghana, represented by the erstwhile Ministry of Power, signed a gas and sales purchase agreement with the West Africa Gas Limited, which we call WAGL, and that is the seller, dated on 7th of October 2015, for supply of 120 million cubic feet standard feet of gas, which of course is regasified, known as the LNG, for an initial period of 5 years. Following counter proposal dated on the 15th of March 2016, the seller has reviewed this term where the initial period had now been moved from 5 years to 10 years, and the gas price brought down to $3.3 per MMBTU from 2.2 to 2.33 to 2.4. So the period has changed from 5 to 10 years, and the price has also reduced to 2.22. Mr. Chairman, on assumption of office by this government, there were an attempt to re-engage the WAGL, which is the company, about the model of construction and siting. Mr. Chairman, I quite remember that the site has been relocated to Sekondi from Tema. Discussion progressed on how soon the construction should commence. My understanding was that the WAGL, wrote further to the ministry at that time. Mr. Chairman, I must also put it on record that I was not the sector minister at the time of this termination. No, I was not the sector minister. What I came to do was to address the difficulties experienced by WAGL and to invite WAGL back to the discussion table. We did invite them to come back for us to discuss. Unfortunately, at the time of discussion when we approached the Attorney General did state that a contract that is terminated cannot be renegotiated. So on that basis, we have to enter into new terms of agreement. It was at the point that we were discussing of getting into new term of agreement that we had a letter, which of course was during my era, by the WAGL company, that they have terminated the contract on their own. They were then demanding for a debt of about 1 billion. They went into arbitration, and the court awarded 50 million against the government of Ghana. That is a brief about the termination of the WAGL contract.
As a follow-up, did you say that you tried to re-engage them after the termination?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. After the termination, which was somewhere in June, Mr. Chairman, I have here a letter in my hand, which I can tell them the 13th of February about the termination. After this termination, I got to the office in September 2020.
Chairman, we request further details. Letter 13, what? Signed by who? What title? You are speaking for our record. So give us the details. Then we'll know who is responsible for this judgment debt, who terminated it. Read it fully for us for our record, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, attended in this letter dated 13th of February 2018, emergency power purchase agreement between the government of Ghana and GPGC Limited, termination notice. I was terminated on 13th of February 2018 by my predecessor, signed by Honorable Boachi Ajako. Mr. Chairman, but I would think and suspected strongly that his termination was also based on advice from other sectors, because unilaterally, you cannot just terminate a contract of this nature on your own. So he may also have gotten advice based on which he acted. I should read the letter.
No, I'm not, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, nominee, we have a problem with roads. Most of our country front roads have not seen bitumen, and in the 2020 campaign, everywhere you go across the country, the key issue was roads, 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 and more roads. Why do you think that we should prioritize railway when the basic has not been dealt with?
Mr. Chairman, I stated earlier on, if you listen to the President's inaugural address, one of the sectors that he mentioned categorically is the railway sector. The railway sector in Ghana has been in a very deplorable state, over several years, more than 50 years. You will recollect the railway sector in Ghana used to be one of the strongest industry when we talk of Ghana Railway Workers Union at that time. The railway sector is key because, number one, it generates a lot of employment. Number two, it opens up new areas for development. And number three, it's a partial index of a faster trigger of economic growth in terms of GDP. In any emerging country that introduces rail lines into their sector, the rate in terms of sequential jump in GDP is astronomical, and that's an evidence for everybody to see. So I think that a divergence from the road sector to a railway sector, in the view of the President, is to trigger our economic growth, expand the economy, and make sure that Ghana is prepared. Again, if you look at the World Bank's recommendations for countries that want to trade together, one of their major recommendations is to allow intercontinental trade among those countries. If the intercontinental trade is going to work effectively, then of course we need the rail, as a means of transport. Cheaper cost of transportation and faster arrival at destination. This again will lower the cost of our products at the consumer end. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The chairman allows for 3 questions and 2 follow-ups. So the second question, what was the reason for the termination of the GCGCP contract? What was the reason in the letter that you showed us here in this committee? What was the reason for the termination?
The Power Ministry at that time, before 2016, commenced a process of rationalization of the energy sector, which of course was a very wonderful idea to see how the energy sector will be well planned so that we do not have more power in terms of generations of more additional powers. So that process continued into 2017, to look at those powers that are coming up, the new IPPs that are coming up. In the recommendations from the AG office, a number of them has been lifted. Mr. Chairman, I had a report here with me stating the various power plants and what should be done by them as a recommendation from the AG. The AG prioritized a lot of the power plants because at that time some of them were supposed to come into commercial operations by the year 2019-2020. So these power plants were prioritized into various sectors. Those that need to be cancelled, those that need to be shifted, and those that can wait after the time that the country would need power. GCGP as a power plant, under the analysis and report from the Attorney General's office, of course, was classified under those power plants that need to be terminated. They were classified basically because there were certain conditions precedent they were expected to meet at the time of construction. For instance, they've not been granted permits. Ghana government was expected to undertake some rules work that, of course, the government had not done and waiting for it to be done. The company itself was expected, for instance, under Section 4G of the agreement, provides the buyer the necessary means to start the construction of the physical infrastructure. So all these things were done ahead without meeting some of the necessary conditions that were precedent to trigger the construction.
Chairman, can we request that the nominee either gives us details or he assures us that he would forward same copy for our purposes, because we need the categorization, those to be cancelled, those to be suspended, those on this, we need it. Because as he's reading, he's not giving us the details in respect of any entity, what were they supposed to do, what is the condition precedent. So, but he's read something from the Attorney General. We need the date, and do submit a copy to Chairman through the clerk for our purposes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have the details of the report here, which I can tender to the committee for perusal.
Later, maybe you will still be asked questions for which you need it, so after that.
Should I go through?
Yes, are you done? You're done, right. Honorable Member for Utu Senior, is that right? Gisela. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, you are on record to have called ex-President Mahama a con man who failed to salvage the mining sector from the deteriorating activities of illegal miners in the country. What has Mahama been able to do? Are you a con man?
Mr. Chairman, no, I am not.
Yes, I'm listening, Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, I am not a conman, and yes, Mr. Chairman, it's on record that I've used that word. It was in reaction to a statement I issued when I was a land minister in Kumasi. And the implications and the dictate of that word was in context with the time I was issuing out the statement. The conman in quotation, it's not directly in reference to what the descriptions might have been. But if of course, the Honorable House.
For the benefit of hindsight, was that an appropriate word to use?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So, yes or no, was that an appropriate word to use?
Chairman, was not appropriate word to use at the time. That's what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So.
No, hold it there, Chairman. Do you want to retract with regret, since you don't want the same word used on you as con man? You do unto Caesar.
Mr. Chairman, in that context, I withdraw that word. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's surprising how it has taken him that long to realize that you must respect the office of the President, and it has taken you that long to withdraw. The same manner on the night of the 6th, you said you were going to kill all of us here. That is one statement. This is the second. What do we expect as a third? Thank you.
No. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are learning stages, and I don't expect the third to come.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. But he's 53 years old. I don't know when he will now learn. Honorable nominee, what are you going to do about encroachment of railway lands? Encroachment of railway lands. The reservations of railway lands have all been encroached. I'm not sure, especially in the urban areas, where slum settlements have developed, makeshift kiosks and so on and so forth, and there's a lot of safety issues with children crisscrossing the railway lines and so on and so forth. What active and proactive measures are you going to be able to take, such that if in your 4 years of being a railway minister, you're able to achieve substantial development in the sector, at least the communities that live around these areas will be safeguarded and their lives will not be in danger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think it's a problem within us as a country. As Ghanaians, I think it's time we change our attitude. The encroachment, it's a very serious problem within the railway industry. Most of the lines currently, as rightly pointed out, have been encroached. Some of the lines that the right-of-way had been paid for, in the colonial days, people had even taken over. Some of the areas have been given to other people to build their houses. What we need to do now, Mr. Chairman, if we go ahead to demolish some of those houses, the cost implications are quite very dense. And so what the ministry is doing currently is to begin to engage chiefs and other areas along our railway lines to acquire new routes, because we believe the acquisition of the new routes will, of course, be cheaper, than coming in to destroy some of these already built houses. And that is why in my earlier submission, I did state that the acquisition of the new route, which of course is a cost and most often very difficult for government to buy in, we will now begin to make the acquisition as an index or as an element within the project cost. So whilst we are building our unit rate, we also build in the right-of-way of acquisition as a cost, so that it becomes very easier for us to acquire those routes. When we acquire the route, what we need to do is to protect them. Because going forward, you will acquire new right-of-way, and the future difficulty is that they may be encroached upon. But as a country, I think we need to protect them through a lot of engagement, stakeholder engagement, talking to the communities along the railway lines, and by doing so, we hope that the encroachment will cease in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the Honorable Nominee. The former Minister for Railways, Honorable Joe Gate, in 2017, after a meeting with railway workers in Kumasi area, announced the Railway Ministry intends to build a major cargo terminal in Ejuso. Considering the fact that work has started, or almost about starting, on the Buankra Inland Port, will you take steps to ensure that the Eastern Railway line from Tema to Kumasi is extended to pass through the inland port at Buankra?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we will take steps to do that. One of the reasons for the inland ports, as you rightly put it up, is to harbor goods that will be transported from the southern end to the middle belt and then to the northern sector. And so it is important that the rail transportation, terminates or pass through that end, so that some of the cargoes, of course, will have a place of lodging. So yes, Mr. Chairman, that is one of the lines that I'm going to put much attention when I zoom, if this House gives me the nod as a sector minister. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The late CEO of the Railway Authority, Richard Dombo, may his soul rest in perfect peace, in February 2020 announced that the feasibility studies on the Accra Sky Line, the Accra Sky Train project, has been completed. Can you tell us more about this project and when work will commence? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me also use this opportunity once again to extend my condolences to the bereaved family of Richard, which passed away some few days ago as the Chief Executive of the Development Authority. In fact, Mr. Chairman, Richard would have been sitting behind me here today. He did indicate to me when he left the hospital that he was coming to support me. I want to say, use this opportunity and extend my condolences to the bereaved family. That project, Mr. Chairman, it's a very important project. Construction work, of course, has not started on that line. The ministry has done through aggressive methods to procure feasibility studies as to how the work will be done. Mr. Chairman, I have not yet gotten to the office, and so I'm unable to give this House any assurance of the date of completion of that project. But what I can assure the House, if given the nod, is that I'll put in every measure to make sure that we continue to build on the work of my predecessor. Mr. Chairman, I also acknowledge that my predecessor and the team at the Railway Ministry have done quite a marvelous job. They have laid the foundation for this country railway, and I'm extremely proud of what they have done. Jogati and the other two deputies have done marvelously for this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Honorable Singh.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, when you were Minister of Lands, the President declared, if I'm permitted to use the word, war against Galamsey. You were tasked to lead the charge. A number of interventions took place, including the seizure of excavators. It was also promised that some drones would be purchased. You put the figure $30 million worth. Later, the Interministerial Committee chair indicated $500,000 was what was paid. I just want to find out from you, also because Mr. Eko Ewusi, later in a caution statement to the CID, indicated that a number of the excavators were taken by you, or you sent people to take those excavators. How many excavators did you seize as minister, and what happened to them, if you know?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first of all, let me put it on record that while I was the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, I have not seized any excavator. What I did when I was a minister was to ask for withdrawals of excavators from mining sites. And at that period, about 500 excavators were withdrawn from the mining sites, but they were not seized. Because the methodology to seize excavators, it's a process through the AG's office. The minister unilaterally cannot seize excavators. So my order was for withdrawal of excavators from the mining site. And I did remember that that withdrawal date has been extended for another 3 months because at that point in time we realized that the excavators, though withdrawn from the mining site, some were still close to the burial site. So we asked that they should be moved further. Because what was happening at that time, which we note very well, was that most of these excavators were not owned by the miners. The excavators were owned by the separate entity. And so we were going to detach the mining of excavators from the owners of the licenses, so that the licenses would have a license to mine, the licensee would have a license to mine, but the excavator who needs to come and work on the excavation site will also be licensed, so that we have two processes. So these were some of the processes that we put in place to undertake. Yes, of course, the interministerial committee which came to handle the situation was a good innovation by His Excellency the President. I did say that we are going to procure a number of drones at the cost of 30 billion cedis. These drones are high-tech drones. They are not the normal drones that we see flying, in Accra. And we did remember that when we engaged one of the dealers in the drone from the United States of America, the price they gave us at that time was 30 million for the number of drones. I think we were going to acquire about 5 drones at that time. Unfortunately, we were not able to acquire the drones, but the processes to address the Galamsey menace have been transferred to the Interministerial Committee, which therefore took over from me whilst I was in office. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman.
What, you want to follow up?
Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful. Honorable nominee, follow up to what the question by the honorable member. When people say that 500 excavators were seized and vanished into thin air, you have spoken to these excavators purported to have been seized and and lost. What would be your reaction to those who say that they were seized and then they vanished?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I personally have also been tagged as taking, I think, 20 excavators or so, but of course, which is not true. I did state that I ordered for the withdrawal of excavators from the site. But after the Interministerial Committee, of course, which I am a member, I was a member, some excavators were seized. As to whether they vanish or not, I don't think that is the issue. The excavators that were seized went through the process of seizing the excavators, and they've all been under the auspices of the chairman of the Interministerial Committee. And this has been transported, some of them have been transported to Accra. I don't know, and I have no idea as a fact to tell this committee that a number of them has gone missing. I haven't got that record. And it's not known to me that any of those excavators have gone missing.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up. The 20 you have been accused of also interfering with, you say it is not true. How do you then address this allegation that is in a cautioned police statement by a COC?
Well, Mr. Chairman, because the gentleman who was supposed to have made a statement, came out to deny it. It was just something somebody put on the social media, and other people speak it across this country. So ECO is on record to have stated categorically that nowhere he did mention that I, Dr. Peter Amewu, took 20 excavators from the 500 or so or 200, whatever number excavators that were seized. Nowhere. So he came out to deny that assertion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, as a reporter, I recalled in 2008 when Ghana experienced Dumsor, a number of interventions, including the importation of some gen sets, were deployed to solve the problem of Dumsor. It was not to be permanently resolved, and so we had Dumsor again under President Mahama. A number of interventions were taken. Those interventions led to heavy criticisms, such as interventions such as the purchase of the car power, Amewu, and other such interventions. The former president and the NDC were lambasted. Given your experience at the Energy Ministry and the fact, which I know, that car power has become one of the most reliable source of power, and the Amewu deal that had to be renegotiated because of its relevance to the power sector, will you say that some of these criticisms were misplaced?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, of course, it's on record today that one of our dependable source of power from the combined cycle turbine is the car power, which is driving into the grid an equivalent of 450 megawatts, on a daily basis, as of when availability is declared. At the time that the issue of whether car power was needed or not was very high in the agenda, the discussions were mainly on the cost of acquisition of the power plant. And so at that time, the capacity charges were, of course, far in excess of what the opposition at that time thought it might be. And so I would say that the thinking at that time was, of course, misplaced, but it was rather to send a signal about the cost of acquisition. You also remember one of the issues raised at that time strongly was the fact that there would be a need for competition and generation, because most of those emergency plans that were acquired went through the process of negotiation. And the understanding that time was the fact that by negotiation we will not be getting value in terms of the tariff rate for the consumers if I had gone through competition, and the price will come down to the consumers at a very low rate. So it was based on that framework that on assumption of office we took in measures to make sure that we renegotiated some of those tariffs. And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to announce to you as I speak that car power's rate, for instance, have been renegotiated in terms of the tariff, and an amount quite close to about 25% in terms of what it was has been reduced down from the capacity charges. And of course, this was even the main reason why in the our last adjustment of the utility bills by the PRC, we didn't see that upgrade in terms of increase in the tariff because of the capacity that car power, of course, was generating into the grid. So yes, car power is one of our major plans. Yes, of course, the rate at that time was high. And yes, today we've been able to negotiate the rate about 25% less than what it was.
But just a quick follow-up on that also. Wouldn't you say the times have also influenced the rates, given the fact that Ghana was in need at the time that the deal was made? And of course, if you are out of the need, you may have an advantage on the negotiation table.
Yes, of course. At the time the decision was taken, it was taken within a short period, and that is why they were classified as emergency power plants, because they were to come in and address emergency issues, which is good. But that doesn't take the responsibility of looking at what the cost was expected to be. The cost could be looked at it from different perspectives. At that time, we thought that the cost in terms of the capacity charge was a bit higher than expected. So time could have changed, as you rightly put it, because at the time car power was brought in, it was expected to feed, for instance, on heavy fuel in Tema. Today, car power is no longer feeding on heavy fuel. Car power is now feeding on gas, because most of our gas is stranded, in the western side. When there's a stranded gas, and it's of course cheaper than heavy fuel, so car power now has been moved, for instance, to the western side. So yes, circumstances, of course, have changed, and today car power is in quite a comfortable position.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the reduced charges may just be as a result of the fact that we are no longer in an emergency situation, and again, because it's no longer using heavy fuel, which is more expensive than the gas that it uses. But I'll move on to my next question. Article 47 of the Constitution, 1992 Constitution, says 47.1, Ghana shall be divided into as many constituencies for the purpose of election of members of parliament as the Electoral Commission may prescribe, and each constituency shall be represented by one member of parliament. You represent the Hohoi constituency. However, there are people in that part of Ghana without a representation in parliament. I refer here to South. I'm sure you are aware of those concerns that have been raised by the people of South. Some have attributed their state to possible gerrymandering that may have taken place before the elections. Did you in any way influence the state of affairs that denied them a representation as we speak? If yes, how? And if no, how do you feel about their situation, though?
Honourable Member, is any part of that matter pending? Is any part of that matter pending in court? Are you aware that any part of the matter related?
Yes, I'm aware that some part of that matter is in court. Yes, some part of it.
Okay, so Honourable, let me guide you. 93, is that right?
Yes, order 93.
Order 93. Reference shall not be made on to any matter on which judicial decision is pending in such a way as may, in the opinion of the Speaker, prejudice the interest to the parties. So I'll be watching what answer you give. If in any way I think you prejudice the parties, I will curtail it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I sympathize with my brothers and sisters from the South for not taking the parliamentary voting process. Of course, I have brothers and sisters from there. Mr. Chairman, I went into this race as a player, but not as a referee. I do not constitute the rules that were in place for me to come and contest. I just went in as a contestant. And unfortunately, for one reason they were not allowed to vote in Howard. Mr. Chairman, that's beyond me, but I sympathize with them. And of course, I would have been very happy if the people of South voted, because in 2004 and 2008, those were my strong areas when I contested as a candidate. And so if they had voted, I strongly believe that even the margin made in Howard would quite be high. I sympathize with them. I only pray that the agencies that be taking measures are quickly to address the problem, to enable them to take part in their voting processes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Congratulations. Minister, the Court of Appeal on Monday, 22nd, gave a ruling in a matter of consolidated civil motion between Springfield and then, let me shorten it for you, Springfield Energy, Springfield Exploration and Production Limited versus ENI and Vitol Upstream. This issue arose in court as a result of a letter dated the 9th of April 2020, which you directed the parties to go into what you term unitization of the oil fields that they were exploring, hydrocarbons. And this letter that you wrote was subsequently suspended by another letter dated the 29th July 2020, signed by your Chief Director for and on behalf of the Minister. Can you allay the fears of Ghanaians of any possible legal issues that may take us to the Court of Arbitration? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, yes, of course, I authorized the unitization of the ENI and the Springfield block. Mr. Chairman, unitization is a common process within the industry, where in the estimations and technical report evaluation indicated that there is a possible communication or movement of petroleum in situ between two blocks. And for the purpose of maximum and efficient extraction, it's important that the two blocks come together and exploit the resources in a common way, so as not to lose the reservoir pressure when two people are working within the same block. So it is on that mandate and that framework of our legislative drive that I issued the letter. The letter, Mr. Chairman, is issued in accordance with the technical report that I have here, which I can also send it in between ENI and the parties. Yes, of course, it's on record that...
Chairman, Mr. Nominee, technical report from where?
From DFCC.
Thank you. So say so.
An independent technical evaluation.
And then, Chairman, follow up. ENI and Springfield, are they all Ghanaian entities? Just a small follow-up.
Mr. Chairman, Springfield is a solely Ghanaian entity. The first...
And ENI?
ENI, it's not... Of course, the company is incorporated in Ghana.
So, Chairman, for the purpose of our record, describe the blocks that you are seeking this, the technical term, unitization, yes. So just give us the details for the purpose of our record. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, it's a channel and hydrocarbon accumulation across WCTP Block 2 and OCTP Block. So these are the two blocks in contention for the call for the Minister for Unitization.
Did you authorize the letter the Chief Director signed of 29th July 2020? Were you in the know of it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
You were in the process of giving an explanation to the...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, this process is a common process, and it was based on this technical report from BMPC that we issued that directive for ENI to comply. Mr. Chairman, ENI was not satisfied with the directive, and we held a number of meetings. Mr. Chairman, we put in place a three-member technical committee to evaluate the data further. Upon further examination of the data, we issue another instruction to the ENI. The other party, which is Springfield, felt that ENI was not promptly complying with the minister's directive and therefore went to court. Mr. Chairman, as I speak now, I think the case is currently before the Court of Appeal, and I don't think it will be good for me to comment further on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, it's appreciated, but is that to suggest that Springfield were unhappy with your decisions?
Not at all. Springfield was unhappy because ENI refused to comply with the ministerial directive.
Were you not interfering with their contractual mandate that you had so granted them in an earlier agreement?
No, Mr. Chairman, ENI brought out the fact of stabilization clauses, and those were some of the discussions that we held behind closed doors. But stabilization clauses cannot, of course, avoid a call for unitization. A call for unitization is a maximum efficiency of extraction of
water. Just clarify, is Springfield asking for respect, ENI to respect your directive, or they are in court for other purposes which may include judgment debt?
Mr. Chairman, ENI went to court to ask, Springfield went to court to ask ENI to comply with the ministerial directive. That was the case, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Honorable nominee, I have with me the report of the Committee on Roads and Transport on the commercial contract agreement between the government of the Republic of Ghana, represented by the Ministry of Railway Development, Ghana Rail Authority, and Amandi Investment Limited for an amount of 500 million euros for the construction of sections of the Western Railway line on standard gauge from Takoradi Port to Huni Valley. I'm sure you're aware of this arrangement.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of that contract.
This House gave the approval to that request, and it details the scope of work that Amandi is supposed to perform. Can you apprise us on this contract or arrangement between Government of Ghana? Per your brief. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think the contract came to Parliament for ratification. The loan agreement had been also placed before the House. Currently, the contractor, Amandi, is at the stage of mobilization, but the terms, in terms of the financial elements within the loan, have been subjected to further cleaning at the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Chairman, as I speak now, ENI is waiting for clearance from the Debt Management Unit and Ministry of Finance, and they will proceed to site to commence construction. That line is very key for us as a country on the Western line, and Amandi as a contractor is ready to move to site immediately. Clearance in terms of availability of funds for construction have been concluded. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, this brings me to my last question, which was sent to me by my constituent called Adobuafu of Abekala Pass Police Post. He wants me to ask you what you are going to do about their salary structure. He works with the Railway Authority, says there are casual workers who are paid 700 Ghana cedis a month, and he feels those within that bracket are not being treated. So I should bring it to your knowledge and ask you what you'll be doing to resolve those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sympathize with your constituents in terms of the size of their salary. Mr. Chairman, productivity must reflect whatever you take home. Unfortunately, the railway industry, as I stated earlier on, is at the verge of collapse, especially the railway company. Normally, most of their internal generated revenues are derived from some of this tariff they got from transportation and haulage of some of our minerals products. Unfortunately, all those facilities currently are not available, even because of the COVID. There's a ban on transportation of passengers. When I assume office, we have to speed up the process of completion of most of these rules, where activities will be brought, online. When those activities come online, and then we begin to generate revenue, then we can begin to look at their salaries. As it is now, if nothing is being done, of course, there is no way we can just manufacture money from the air and begin to pay them. We must look at what they do. And so we will try to revamp the industry. That's why government is putting attention in revamp of the railway sector. If that is done and done properly, I think that their salaries will commensurate the activities that we emerge from the revamping exercise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Yes, Honorable Ajay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable nominee, in Ghana currently, there is an ineffective railway legal and regulatory regime, because as we speak right now, there is no regulation for Railway Act 2008, Act 779. What do you intend doing if you are given the nod?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, regulations are important to drive the law, and they give bare understanding of the framework of the law. And so in every area or sector that we lack regulations, you see a lot of gaps in terms of implementation. If this House gives me the nod, Mr. Chairman, I would speed up on coming out with the regulation, because the law mandates the minister to do so. I'll come out with the necessary regulation to make sure that the sector becomes very viable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What are two key things that you want to do when you are given the nod? Two key policy decisions that you take to improve the railway sector if you are given the nod?
Mr. Chairman, one key thing I need to look at quickly when this House gives me the nod is to begin to look at the role of the GRDA, which is the Ghana Railway Development Authority. Currently, the Act spells out their role as an asset owner and as a regulator. It is important, as we all know, that you cannot be a player and at the same time a referee in the same game. If we really expect a future expansion of the industry where the anticipations is for private sector to lead the growth in the future, in the long run, then it's important that we must detach the asset ownership from the regulator. So coming out with an independent regulator to regulate the framework of the railway construction and operation, it's something that I will look at quickly. The other thing that I also have to look at is the intercontinental transportation system through rail, which is of course also very important. For instance, the rail line going from Tema through Mpakadan, to Burkina Faso. Of course, that passes through my constituency, Howe, and part of it goes through Honorable Okujoto's constituency also. So those lines, of course, we will concentrate on it and make sure that we drive it down to the northern territory of this country, and make sure that we link the two countries,
Chairman, together. Northern territory is too broad. Where do you want to extend the railway to? When you say northern territory, I can go from Waya through Bolga, through Hamlin, through Nabrongo, coming towards Savrugo or Diale. Where are you exactly referring to? Or even Gushegu, if it has to pass through Yendi or Bimbla or Napaye, be specific.
Mr. Chairman, that line terminates at Tamale and then continue from Tamale through Bolkatanga down to Ouagadougou in the northern part.
Tamale is appreciated. In your answer to the Honorable Ejari, are we expecting you leading reforms that separate asset ownership from regulation when you become minister? When do you intend to take this initiative if you do become minister? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, this will be taken within my first 6 months in office if the House gives me the nod. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Last, which is a statement. I read this on page 7 of the handing over notes from your ministry. I hope that we will not read the same thing as what you want to do, that GRDA does not want to be a judge in its own course, and that you really meet your 6-month deadline to make sure that it's really separated. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll do so. Thank you.
Yes. Very well.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Honorable nominee, I have 2 questions. The first one borders on a promise you made to the people of Lower Manya when the very unfortunate incident of police brutality and shootout occurred. You recall that you led a team to the community and promised that you were going to investigate the incident and make sure that the perpetrators were brought to book. We had some fatality, people dying, others had their parts amputated, and so on and so forth. What is the state, or what is the status of that investigation, if you have done so?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it's on record that I led a team to the scene and they promised that we would investigate the matter. Mr. Chairman, we put in a committee to begin the investigation at that time. But what happened was that the case went to the police, to look into. So our committee then, therefore, slagged behind in terms of the investigation. And we actually have not completed the investigation. It's on record, we have not completed the investigation because we have relegated that duty to the police when we were told later that the police are on top of the issue.
But being a minister in charge of that sector at the time, are you willing to follow up so you know the status of that investigation, particularly because lives were lost and there are many who were injured and we need to bring that matter to a closure?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I'll provide this advice to the new sector minister coming in if he's giving the note. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The second question borders on the light rail transit system. What is the current status of the integrated light rail transit system?
As I stated earlier on, some feasibility works have been done, but no much details, in fact, have been done beyond that light rail system. But that area includes both some of the network within Accra and then Kumasi. So feasibility studies are currently ongoing.
What measures would you put in place to ensure that we achieve this? Because this was part of the 2016 manifesto promise of the MPP, and we would expect that after 4 years it would have been achieved. But since you are now going to that ministry, what kind of assurances can you give the people of Ghana that we are going to see, is going to see the light of day very soon?
Mr. Chairman, if this House gives me the nod, taking into consideration the difficulty we have in terms of our internal transportation system, that will be a key area to look at to speed up, the commencement of that project, because that will also, free our roads, and the traffic density that we witness along our roads, of course, will be reduced. So it's something that I will do very quickly. I'll commence the process. Again, the difficulty, as we all know, has to do with availability of funds. But notwithstanding that, I will promise the House that it's something I will look on quickly when this House gives me the nod and when I get to the office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Railway construction projects are capital intensive, and many of the figures bandied around are between 500 million, a billion, and upwards. We all know that COVID has also affected the global economy and the Ghanaian economy as well. As you move to the Railways Ministry, if confirmed, how are you going to raise funding to undertake the project of reconstructing our railway sector?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, of course, railway is very capital expensive. A kilometer of railway runs between $6 to $7 million, far in excess of what the road sector currently witness. In the midst of this COVID, global fund, it's very limited. But Mr. Chairman, I'm praying that now that we've got a vaccine, we will begin to see the reductions of the COVID and the world will gradually begin to move in its normal way. We will proceed with looking for funding, no matter the difficulty, because our capital within the country itself, in terms of the resources, are very limited, and therefore it's going to be difficult to rely on government funding of railway projects. So we'll explore other avenues. I appreciate your concern, about the difficulty of global funds. Notwithstanding that, we'll still explore the avenue to see how we can attract that. The second one is, as I think I've stated it earlier, the government must also make efforts to continue to look at the railway sector as a social product, just as we do, for the roads. If we put that attention, which of course I know His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo will do, if you listen carefully to his inaugural address, with the attention that he wants to put on the railway sector, then parallel along external funding and domestic funding, we should be able to speed up most of this construction and put it in a state that Ghanaians will benefit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, as you continue to expand railway infrastructure in this country, can you give this committee an assurance that all new rail construction will be provided with ducts? As you do the excavation, you put pipes alongside it where fiber and even electricity cables can also be laid alongside the tracks to extend that infrastructure to the other parts of the country and prolong the lifespan of the infrastructure we're putting in place. When people are constructing roads, they construct the roads without reference to development. So, a few years down the line, other contractors come along the line, dig across the roads to lay pipes. If they provided ducts alongside the roads and the railways infrastructure, it would just be a means of passing those pipes along those channels. So, going forward, are you going to assure this committee that you would mandate that all new construction of railway infrastructure would have pipes laid alongside it to facilitate, would have ducts for fiber and electrical and other cables laid alongside it to prolong the lifespan and make it easier for us to extend these complementary infrastructure to the rest of the country?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, infrastructure development under normal circumstances should not be looked at as a unilateral development. We should consider it complementary, jointly, with other sectors that it's, of course, very important. And if you look at how these things are done all over the world, ministries are always in collaboration to know where they fit in terms of the infrastructure development. So I think your suggestion is well noted. Of course, going forward, we should begin to do this jointly, where rail lines will be constructed without putting in the necessary ducts that will mandate, for instance, the communication ministry to do other activities, water to do its activities, electricity service to undertake its activities. So I think this combination in terms of looking at which other sectors fit into the construction to advance, on that proponent, of course, it's something that we will look at. Of course, we are colleagues that are going to sit in cabinet together, and I'm going to consult you from time to time when this project, sorry if I'm giving the nod, we'll be sitting together to discuss some of these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, please.
Now, Aka Energy appears to have stoked quite a bit of controversy. And there have been a lot of calls, even this past week, that the contract be renegotiated, because some people think that it is not in the interest of the country. Was the Aker Energy contract good for Ghana or not? And or are there aspects of it that can be improved that you'd recommend to your successor in office?
The renegotiation of the Aker contract, I think, was done with good faith. It came to this house, the house gave us the nod, and it was done with an intention that in the long run, Ghana will really benefit. In terms of the legislative aspect of the contract, we have not done anything that is quite different from what the contract states specifically. What the contractor seeks to do is, because of the stabilization clause that were in the contract at the time it was signed, the contractor insists that coming into effect of the new EMP law, we should take him out of the new EMP law and make sure that we include clauses in that contract to make sure that anybody who reads that contract can read outright that this contract is not subjected to the terms and conditions in the new EMP. That was what we did with the Aker contract, and we came to the Parliament here for necessary approval. I think that it was also done with anticipation that while the contractor is still on site doing its development, the mandate also exists for him again to undertake exploratory activities. These are again clauses that we have picked from the new one because it was not in the old one. Where stabilization provisions exist in contract, Mr. Chairman, what it does is that it gives the developer the mandate to do choose and pick, of course, because he would, of course, be eliminated from the new one that is coming in. But when we as a country find out that there is something new that we can impose on him, we will do that. And that is why we mandated the contractor that he can still go ahead to do exploration even though he's doing the development, which we think is good. We did that for the purpose that we can increase our reserve to production ratio. Mr. Chairman, today, most of our reserves are drying very fast, and new wells have not been replaced. In the oil and gas sector, what is important is to look at your reserve replacement ratio, because these resources are not, they are finite, they are not infinite. And so as you take it, you need to add more. So by doing this, we expect that we'll be adding more reserves to the existing reserve to increase our production. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, how much exactly is the energy sector debt? And how much did the free electricity for COVID extended by government to the citizens cost the exchequer?
The energy sector debt stands at about $1.5 billion US from a figure of about $2.7 billion. I've stated earlier on that the Ministry of Finance has already cleared all the debts, it owes ECG. So the debt today, it's about $1.5 billion through reconciliation. And I think that's a very good effort by this government. The electricity relief, which we call the COVID relief that His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo introduced, basically was to address the suffering of Ghanaians during the peak period of the COVID. A total of quite close to about 1 billion Ghana cedis was paid, and these have been segmented between ECG, VRA, and then NETCO. Mr. Chairman, I have details of the payment which I can tender to this committee. The total payment to date is about $1 billion US. CD, sorry. For instance, the ECG customer populations and revenue causes a total of almost about, as at the end of April, May, June 2020, we have about 731 million Ghana cedis. That from NETCO total up to 140 million Ghana cedis, and that of VRA total up to 166 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Chairman, you recollect that His Excellency had again extended it for 3 months. That 3 months addition, of course, is not here, but it's also end up approximately about another 200 million cedis. So if you add the 200 million cedis to the 1.15 that we're talking about, it will be in the range of about 1.3 billion Ghana cedis as a cumulative relief for Ghanaians.
Thank you. Honorable Aya.
Thank you very much. I think I'll just take it from there. Honorable nominee, you just spoke about government payment of debts from public agencies, MMDAs, assemblies to electricity company. Now, I don't know if you have cited this comparative analysis of electricity tariffs in ECOWAS member countries, sponsored by the ECOWAS Regional Electricity Regulatory Authority and the African Development Bank, 2019. They did some studies on comparative tariffs for West African countries, all 15 of them. And they mentioned, they gave 2018 data because it's 2019 study. And generation cost was 55%. Transmission cost was 6%. Distribution cost was 39%. And it was the highest in the sub-region, the distribution cost. And the transmission loss for Ghana was 4.4%. Nigeria was 8.4%, and then, Benin was 5.4%. I'm just giving you some two other countries just so that you can contextualize it. Now, you talk about the problem of the sector being inefficiency in distribution. Within the period that you were there, what did you do to address the inefficiency in distribution? Because I don't think that we should be happy that we've paid the bills, because if we are paying inefficient prices, it means we're just throwing good money after bad money. So what's your position on that? What did you do, and then what do you think should be done?
Thank you. We did two major things to address the costs within the system. As you rightly put it, the 39% for the distribution was extremely very high. And this 39% again was as a result of the losses that we have. The distribution losses in Ghana, it's in the range of about 25 to 30% sometimes, which is very high. What that means is that about 25% of our power that we produce had not been consumed, but they've been paid for. They vanish somewhere along the line, either through the distribution system, because, as I stated earlier, most of the equipment that we have are obsolete, or they vanish as a result of the power theft at the supply end, where people get the power and they've not been able to capture it for payment processes. What we did was an injection of about $100 million by His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo into ECG to make sure that all obsolete equipment.
By the government of Ghana or by Nana?
By government of Ghana. By government of Ghana.
I thought maybe he made some donation to ECG.
There was no. Well, the ECG value the obsolete equipment that we have, because most of this equipment were the cause of the losses, and it was in the range of $100 million, which His Excellency directs that we should take steps to replace those equipment. And as I speak now, it came to Cabinet, Cabinet gave the approval, and the work had begun in those areas. Intensively, they are in Ashanti region and in the Greater Accra region. You may begin to experience some flexibility, in your lighting system. This is as a result of some of this replacement of the obsolete equipment that is undertaken. So that is one thing that we've done. The other thing that we did, which have to buy into the 65% that you talk about, the generation, it's also to renegotiate some of the capacity charges, because generation of 65% is extremely high. So these two things that we have done, the renegotiation of the capacity charges and injecting more newer and brighter equipment into the distribution end, helps us to address the system as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What percentage decrease in tariff should consumers expect by the time you complete these two exercises?
It will reflect definitely on the consumer tariff. Mr. Chairman, it's also on record to note that the tariff that consumers enjoy today here, it's still less than the tariff they consumed in about 5-6 years back. So the further reductions or making sure that these costs are taken out, of course, is going to reduce the tariffs further. As I stated, for instance, migrating of car power from heavy fuel to gas, for instance, alone, was the major cause of just an increment of 7% in tariff that we witnessed in 2020. Tariffs were going to go up as high as 35% according to the PRC prediction. But because of that movement alone, that reductions, of course, comes down to benefit the consumers. I would expect not less than 10 to 15% if we are able to address the system to see some benefits in terms of the tariff. The tariff system as it exists now needs to be very flexible in terms of the adjustment. The automatic price adjustment formula has not often been triggered, and what happened is the accumulation of that ending up raising the tariff anytime PRC would want to increase it. So frequent adjustments in terms of triggering the automatic adjustments, it's also very important so that at any particular point in time, we should know where we are. Especially as you see today, prices of petroleum products are currently climbing because we are getting gradually out of the COVID relief. So we should be seeing some little incremental increase in some of these products as we move forward.
In 2017, the per capita access to electricity from the Africa Development Bank studies in Ghana was 79%. Per capita access to electricity in Ghana, and it was the highest in the entire sub-region after Cape Verde. And you can understand Cape Verde is a very small country, and they use a lot of renewable energy sources. 2020, what is the per capita access to electricity now? What's your data? And add that to Keta exploration as Saltpond, what's happened to those two exploration activities?
Your first question was I didn't get one clear.
The first point was the per capita access to electricity in Ghana today. 2017 it was 79% per capita access to electricity. Yeah. The next highest country in West Africa was Cape Verde, which had 92% per capita access to electricity. Mm. So I'm asking you, at the time you were leaving office, what was the per capita access to electricity in Ghana? And then take on board a question on Keta exploration, which I know started. What's the status of the Keta exploration?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The access rate at time I was leaving office at about 85%. Which is, of course, one of the highest within the region. I mean, coming very close after South Africa. Ghana has done very well in terms of its penetration of access to electricity. With the Keta exploration, it's about 85%, 84.7, getting to about 85%. Yeah. But the policy of government was to move it up to 90%. And this House will recollect the number of 10 key projects that we brought into the House. It is expected that when the construction began in most of those communities, the access rate will be moved to quite close to 90%. The delay in commencement of those projects, I think it's something that everybody knows. Because of the COVID, we have delayed the implementation of those projects. But I'm sure that as we get out of the COVID, most of those contractors will return back to sites to speed up the construction, and this will increase the access rate. The Keta exploration project, temporarily, it's at halt. Again, basically because of the injection of capital from the IOCs. But what government has done is to intensify the online exploration, which extended up to the north. GMPC has done quite a very intensive work. The 2Ds have been completed. The areas have been closed up for further 3D exercise. The GMPC report proves that the areas are looking very, very good. And so we have increased activities in terms of exploration on the onshore, but we have minimized activities on the offshore in terms of the Keta Basin itself.
Our last question, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you have had...
No, this is my last question.
You have had 3.
Pardon?
You have had 3 already. In fact,
No,
more than 3.
just ask one and then a baby. Carry on.
I'll take a last
Okay.
one.
That has to do with small-scale mining. The nominee who just left before you came tried to defend government record in terms of fighting Galamsey. You were there. The general perception out there is that you performed abysmally in fighting Galamsey. There was a temporary halt, you seized equipment and etc. But as we speak today, I mean, there's a lot of Galamsey activity going on across the country. Can you explain really what is the problem of Galamsey, and with the benefit of hindsight, now that you are leaving the ministry, what would you recommend should be done differently? Take into consideration the activities of Minerals Commission, the role of district assemblies, the role of chiefs, the role of security agencies on the grounds, and all the citizens. What do you think should be done differently?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue of Galamsey in Ghana is not quite different from what we see even in the mature provinces. When the gold rush, for instance, happened in the United States of America, I think it was more than what we see currently in Ghana. But it takes them time as a country, to build consensus and go forward to address the problem. The Galamsey problem we have in Ghana has to do more with attitude and also our behavior towards our environment. Yes, of course, this government came in with an approach to address the Galamsey problem because largely we believe that the use of the force might not necessarily be the way to address it. But as human as we are, some force would have to be introduced. So I wouldn't say that the government has failed in its attempt to address the Galamsey problem. The problem of Galamsey is an ongoing, and solution to address it must also be an ongoing. It cannot be an event. When I was a sector minister, I think we put in a lot of measures, and those measures again find its way into the interministerial committee, of environment that we try to resolve. There were some excesses, of course, in a human environment. You must expect that. But I think that my advice for the new minister is to relook at some of the regulations. I quite remember we came out with a multilateral mining integrated approach document, which had fortunately not been implemented. I would advise the new sector minister to look into that because the World Bank was prepared to buy into that. The Australian government was prepared to buy into that. Unfortunately, we couldn't launch that document as at the time I left that ministry. So my advice to the incoming minister may be to advise him to go back and look into the multilateral mining integrated project document, which I think will be a way forward to address the Galamsey menace we have in the country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, congratulations for your new position. Sometime last year, somewhere around the end of September, the President was in Kumasi, specifically in my constituency, to commission a 51-kilometer long standard gauge railway line to connect Eduarden and Ashanti region. At the commissioning, I learned that the current railway development plan envisaged a complete movement away from the narrow gauge to the standard gauge. What, in your view, will be for this new policy approach to the sector, if you can enlighten us on that? Thank you.
Chairman, the new master plan, as she rightly put it, deviate from the narrow gauge to the standard gauge. There are advantages, in both ends. But the major reason why the country is moving to the standard gauge is the fact that the narrow gauge hardly has currently been undertaken by any new emerging countries, except even within our sub-region here in Africa. It's only South Africa that it seems to be using the narrow gauge. The narrow gauge, what it does is that it enables the train to be able to, meander through smaller communities. And by doing so, it travels at a lower speed because its ability to meander through narrow communities. The introduction of standard gauge, what it means is that the speed is going to be very high, in the sense that the stability in terms of what it sits on the base